Today's episode is brought to you by Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the show, go to patreon.com/JoshuaVelas and become a $2 backer today and get early access to the new episodes. I'll be leaving a link in the description down below, but for now, on to today's episode. You're listening to the Augmented Experience podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Joshua Velas. I'm a student, musician, and a gamer at heart. Join me as I sit down every week to talk about all the latest news in the technology, business, and video game world. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is Joshua Velas. I'm your host as usual, and obviously welcome back to the show. Today's episode 130 of the show, and before we get started, we're going to do a bit of house cleaning real quick because, well, a lot of things, I would say not a lot of things has changed, but definitely it has to be done because, well, it's house cleaning. We always like to start the show with it, so you guys know the usual stick. I know. I do want to thank you guys for coming back and listening to the show. It really does mean a lot to me. You guys constantly keep coming back, and you keep downloading the episodes, you keep sharing the episodes, you keep being involved in the process of doing all this stuff, because this isn't, for me personally, like I said, I've mentioned this multiple times, the show is very fun for me. It's a great way for me to relax, to enjoy myself, to have a good time, to really just talk about what I like. And I thank you guys for coming back and supporting that by sharing the episodes, by downloading the episodes, by watching the videos on YouTube, by listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to listen to your podcast. And then at the same time, even the Patreon backers, which I will jump to y'all to say thank you for being Patreon backers. It really does mean a lot to me. I really do appreciate it because you guys, are going out of your way to support me. Even though, yes, it's only a small $2 a month. That's, like I said, I decided to go with $2 a month for early access to the episodes because it makes it easier to get content to you guys that want access to these episodes earlier. And obviously in time we will add more benefits to the Patreon backers so that there's more incentive to become a backer and things like that. But over time, that's why I said over time, because it takes a little bit of time to figure that stuff out, especially as a college student. It's not easy to take time to figure that out, but I do want to say thank you to everyone from the bottom of my heart. It really does mean a lot to me. And I also want to say we actually shattered the goal for the year that we hit over 2,000 total downloads this year. And I do want to say thank you for that. It really does mean a lot to me. We're currently at 2,075 at that range. And I do want to thank you guys so much for that because it really does mean a lot to me. So I would say another fair goal. Let's see if we can get 2,500 before the end of the year. So let's go for 2,500. So you guys keep downloading the episodes, keep sharing them. It really does mean a lot to me. But it's time that we go into the episode and I do a little bit of explaining real quick because this episode is not coming at your normal time. I know that I said Friday. I know. But I got super busy with some of my classwork where I wasn't expecting it to be so time consuming. And as a result, I was not able to record the episode at the usual time that I do. And as a result, the episode does not come out at the normal time that I was expecting it to come out. So, we're working with that now. Granted, this is just a one-time thing. Like I said, I wasn't expecting it to do, I would say I wasn't expecting the classwork to be as intensive as it was, but it was. We dealt with it and now we're here. So now it's time to actually talk about this week's episode because we mentioned it on Wednesday's episode, which if you haven't listened to Wednesday's episode, I'll be leaving something above so you guys can go watch that episode or listen to it, whichever one you prefer. But I will say that this topic, I'm glad that I had a little bit more time with it. And I know that I said in Wednesday's episode that this was a topic of the day. However, as time goes on, I'm starting to notice how this isn't just a topic of the day. And that's why I felt the need to take my time with it. Because yes, I know it's super easy to just say, hey, Microsoft buys out Zenimax. Microsoft owns Bethesda now. Big games coming. I know it's super easy to say that. However, there are some long-standing ramifications to this purchase that a lot of people don't seem to realize. And also there seems to be some misconceptions going on about comments made by one of the PlayStation higher officials regarding the Xbox Series S, and that's what we're going to tackle today is talk about the Zenimax purchase and at the same time address a lot of the concerns that people have and even debunk a lot of the misinformation that's being put out there, because like I said, the internet is a very vast place. It's very vast. Like, I'm being honest with you guys, you can find a lot of stuff on the internet, you can figure out how to do a lot of things on the internet. That doesn't mean everything on the internet's right though. So let's talk about it. The Microsoft purchase of Zenimax. Obviously, it's easy to say why this is a big deal. Microsoft owns Bethesda, so that means now they own Doom, they own Elder Scrolls, they own Wolfenstein, they own Evil Within, they own they own all these IPs. And yes, it's very big because it adds to Microsoft's already massive roster of first-party developers, but at the same time, it also adds to, Game Pass. And a lot of people are like, well, why do you say that? And as clear example, on October 1st, Doom is coming to Game Pass. And that's a pretty big deal because, like I said, Doom Eternal is a very big game. I have personally said Doom Eternal should be game of the year because there's no game that has given almost no compromises as close to Doom Eternal. Because, like I said, Doom Eternal is just amazing. It's a phenomenal game, and I highly recommend that you play it. And if you're an Xbox fan, then yeah, you'll be able to try it out on Game Pass. And that's cool because now you get to actually try it out and not have to spend the full price tag for it. Because I know a lot of people on PC, myself included, I waited till it went on sale, which that's what I did. I waited till it went on sale and then bought it. But for now that it's going to be on Game Pass, now you get an even better deal. And I think that's really cool. I think that's very impressive because this just solidifies that this has been in the works for a while. And this actually supports a theory that I've seen going around as I was going through videos and talking to people about it, seeing comments, and I noticed that a lot of people felt that this announcement should have been made at the July event. But like I said, since the deal is still in progress, it made sense why it got delayed, and this actually adds support to the theory that the July event actually got limited because of, delayed transactions and things like that. That information was not able to be shown at that time, or it wasn't ready to be shown. And that's very interesting because that means that the July event would have been much bigger, that this would have been a huge announcement to do at the July event that would have honestly played a big factor. And now that everything has happened that's happened, we got the price reveals, we have the Zenimax purchase, we have all these things happening, and we're seeing how it plays out. And now it's like, okay, now it's starting to make sense. Now the big picture is making sense. And to me personally, it's very interesting to see how this all plays out. Because like I said, I've seen a lot of misconceptions going around that people are like, oh, Microsoft wouldn't make Doom or Elder Scrolls for exclusive. They wouldn't do that. That would cripple the sales. And I'm like, if PlayStation is able to make Final Fantasy 16 a console exclusive to the PlayStation 5, yeah, and Spider-Man, I'm like, yeah, bud, totally. That totally makes sense that Microsoft would not do the same thing, because they would. I'm just being honest with you. You wouldn't invest $7.5 billion, which that's how much they paid for ZeniMax. You wouldn't invest that much money if you weren't going to use it as an actual exclusive. That doesn't make logical sense. Like, why would you invest so much money into your platform and not use it to its potential? You get what I'm saying? Like, because people don't seem to realize, because I think even Colt Eastwood posted a video that a lot of people weren't going to be happy about, but it was just objective fact. When you look at the actual market share, where you include, when you include Xbox, when you include PC, you include mobile, Microsoft owns the PC space, the mobile space, and they also have the Xbox, like the actual Xbox. When you look at it and you actually divvy up the whole market, the consumer wise, Microsoft owns the majority of the market, because they own the mobile space, they own PCs, they also own Xbox. Granted, the other remaining percentages would be divvied up between PlayStation and Nintendo, but in the grand scheme of things, Microsoft owns the majority of the market, especially because now the xCloud is launching and it's going to be with Game Pass for free. So you get what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't make sense why Microsoft wouldn't levy that exclusive privilege, because they have a majority of the market. Because yes, I know some people say mobile gaming is dumb and things like that, but now that gaming is moving towards a service, it only makes sense that now, especially given how powerful smartphones are, and especially like as we've done multiple talks with Juan, smartphones are able to perform on console level. They are. It's just objective fact because these processors are getting better. And at the point where we're at, they could actually compete with the Nintendo Switch and run things a lot better than the Switch. And as we noticed, our smartphones have great batteries. They have amazing displays, high refresh rates, strong processors, a lot of RAM. You can add storage pretty easily depending on your manufacturer. If you're an Apple, then shit out of luck. But we're at the point where Microsoft owns the majority of the market. And they're also the most consumer friendly because they've obviously have been spending so much time rebuilding the brand after the whole debacle with the Xbox One launch. After that whole shit show. I'm not going to lie to you guys. That was a complete shit show. After that whole shit show, it only made sense that Microsoft was going to come back and do things the right way, because that launch was abysmal. That launch was terrible. It did not make sense. And it showed a lack of focus from Microsoft because they didn't know what they were doing. And now that Phil Spencer is in charge, now there's focus, now there's determination, now there's direction. And Microsoft is showing that their long-term game plan is going to win out, because they're at a point where Sony cannot compete with Game Pass. They can't. I know some people say, well, it's quantity over quality, but it's like, yeah, but the fact that you put cloud gaming in there, you put, all the launch titles, brand new IP launch titles, day one on Game Pass. Sony is playing catch up this entire time, because in terms of power, they're still playing catch up. In terms of pricing, I would argue they're still playing catch up because of recent developments coming around that the PS5 might actually be underpowered, because there's a lot of developers coming out and saying that the PS5 was actually supposed to launch in 2019, that it wasn't actually meant to be a next generation console, but just a refresh, because it's not really pushing RDNA 2 hardware. It's rather pushing RDNA 1, like with some features from 2, but it's not truly next gen. And I know that sounds weird to say that, but I've noticed this when watching a lot of the Sony events. You notice how a lot of the games don't seem to be running the best. And a lot of people notice that because they've noticed, why is Sony leaning in so heavily on specific ways of presenting information? And I get it, it's a marketing scheme. That's all this is, just pure marketing, because you want your console to look the best. But isn't it a bit concerning that Sony hasn't let anybody actually have like a breakdown of the console? Like actually let, say, like Digital Foundry or anybody like that actually get their hands on the console to actually break it down and test it? Like, it's a very, very interesting thing that it does have weight. I'm not saying this is 100% fact. I'm just saying, based on my opinion of how I'm viewing the situation, I truly believe the PS5 is actually going to be underpowered. That if the rumors are true that it's a 15 to 20% power difference between the PS5 and the Xbox One X, or the Series X, really, my bad. I know the naming scheme is dumb. I know I messed it up. But if it is true that it's 15 to 20% more powerful in terms of graphics, obviously the Series X is compared to the PS5, then it doesn't make much sense. Because yes, I get it. Some people say, well, there's $100 price difference. I'm like, yeah, but you also have to keep in mind in the PC space as well, $100 difference for 15 to 20% more power. People gladly take that more power with no questions asked, because you have to think about it. Objectively speaking, the Xbox One X, or gosh darn it, I keep messing up this stupid name because I know these names are stupid. The Xbox Series X is the better console overall. The only difference is the SSD. And even then, the PS5's SSD, I know they've been hyping this thing up, but it's like, okay, so games will load a little bit faster. What? That doesn't really make a difference. And I know a lot of people say, well, Josh, isn't that a little bit short-sighted on the conversation? I'm like, well, no, that's objectively what an SSD does. That's its job, is faster read and write speeds. And the main important thing is having consistent read and write speeds. And it's very interesting seeing how Microsoft, yes, they're using PCI Gen or M.2s, NVMEs, they're obviously PCIe Gen 4s, but they have a consistent read and write speed. And that's very important. Yes, is it not as good as the PlayStation? Absolutely. However, with the velocity architecture, with the consistent read and write speeds, with obviously good heat sinks on them, because obviously the thermal design of the PS5 doesn't look as good as the thermal design on the Xbox Series X, which granted, when we get hands-on, will we actually be able to see this in person, which, like I said, I definitely want to see these tests done, because PlayStations are known for terrible thermal performance, especially sounding like jet engines. But it'll be interesting to see what happens, because a lot of people are concerned, especially given a lot of developments coming from Sony side in terms of backtracking, a lot of statements that not really going all in with next gen, like Spider-Man Miles Morales is going to be on PS4, Horizon Zero Dawn, the new Horizon Zero Dawn is going to be on the PS4, and a lot of people were actually sad about that, because that's like, well, you're limiting the game now, because now it's going to run on the PS4. And I get it makes sense, like you don't want to leave that fan base behind, because there's a lot of people on the PS4 ecosystem, but it takes away a lot of reasons to upgrade to the PS5 now, because a lot of people that support Sony and support the PlayStation brand gave Microsoft a lot of flack when they did the same thing with Halo Infinite, that they said it was going to run on the older consoles, and that some games will run on the older consoles. And now Sony has done the same thing. So it's like, now you're being hypocrites. That's basically what you're doing. Now you're being pure hypocrites. And that's what we're dealing with right now. This is the situation we're in. And this is something that a lot of people need to realize, that, look, the console wars are done. Sony cannot compete with Microsoft. You are not feasibly going to justify a $90 billion company, which is Sony, trying to compete with a $1 trillion company known as Microsoft. That is not physically possible. That is logically impossible in terms of business, like using business logic. A $1+ trillion company is going to squash a $90 billion company, no questions asked. Microsoft could buy out Sony if they wanted to. Like, people need to realize that. In the grand scheme of things, if Microsoft wanted to, and granted, if it was legal, then they could easily buy out Sony with chump change money. Like, if they were able to drop $7.5 billion on Zenimax, you have to keep in mind, keep these numbers in max. The total the total gross amount made by the Avengers movie is less than how much Microsoft spent on buying ZeniMax. Sony made $6-something billion in 2019. Microsoft spent more than that to buy a company like it was chump change. And the fact that it was pure cash and it wasn't stocks either, that should show, yes, Microsoft has serious money. And a lot of people need to realize this, that, look, the console wars are dumb. They're stupid. I have told people the console wars are dead. They've been dead for a long time, because this is not a debate of power anymore. Because yes, undisputedly, Microsoft has the more powerful console. They just have, because they're able to put more resources towards developing better hardware. That's just what happens. Microsoft has more money in the tank. And yes, now Microsoft is willing to flaunt that money around, because you wouldn't make this kind of investment if you weren't serious, that you wanted to compete, that you wanted to put up a fight. Like, a lot of people seem to forget that. Like, they wouldn't be selling this console at a loss, because think about it, the Xbox Series X is equivalent to a $1,500 to a $2,000 PC. A lot of people are like, yeah, I should have built a PC. I'm like, okay, it depends. What is your workflow? If you're just going to play all games, then just buy the Xbox, because you're going to get the same level of performance for much less. And a lot of people seem to underestimate, because they're like, oh, these consoles can't be as good as they said they are. And I'm like, well, we've seen this stuff run. We've seen ray trace Minecraft work. We've seen Gears running at true 4K 60 FPS with no issues. And now we're seeing more games, and now these developers are coming out with games, and it's just it's truly going to be interesting seeing how these consoles play out day one. And I should know, because I'm getting an Xbox Series X day one, and I'm very excited for that, because I was going through hell and high water to get these stupid console pre-ordered, and I'm glad I was able to get it, because now I'll be able to give my thoughts and impressions on it when I get it, because now this is, to be perfectly honest, this is the first time I'm buying a console day one. It's the first time I've actually bought a console on the day it comes out. It's the first time I've ever done that. I've never did that for a Nintendo DS. I've never done that for a 3DS. I've never done that for a Wii. I've never done that for a PlayStation 2. I've never done that for a 360, and I never did that for an Xbox One. But now I'm doing it for this, because I'm excited for what this promotes, because this promotes a change in the console space, because now we're getting hardware that's able to compete with PCs. And this is incredible. And I know a lot of people bully console gamers that it can't be taken seriously, but it's a very interesting change of dynamic, because now PCs are considered the lowest common denominator, even though, yes, I get it. The 3080 and stuff like that, phenomenal graphics cards. I wish I would get one, but obviously I can't because of scalpers. Thanks, assholes. But this promotes a healthy competition. That's what it does, is it gives consumers options. And now the fact that you're giving console gamers power that hasn't been seen before on consoles, keep in mind, I'm saying this specifically on consoles, you have something very interesting going on. And this is exciting. This is personally exciting. And this actually leads into the discussion regarding the Series S being underpowered based on comments made by PlayStation executives. I think, like I said, it only makes sense. Of course, the PlayStation executives are going to talk down on the Series S. It makes sense because they're like, look, for $100 more, you can buy a true next-gen experience, because the Xbox Series S is considered not next-gen, that it's not going to compete, and that it's underpowered, and that's going to be, outdated in a couple of years. But that doesn't make sense when it's literally using a better CPU than the PS5. It's using RDNA 2. Yes, it's not as powerful as a GPU as inside the PS5 or the Series X, but it's still primarily designed for 1080p and 1440p at 60 to 120 FPS. And a lot of people seem to forget that, because this is a value console. This primarily focuses on where the majority of the consumers will be. A lot of people don't give a rat's butt cheeks about 4K gaming at high frame rates. They don't. A lot of people don't care. A lot of people still are on 1080p and 1440p. That is the sweet spot for gaming nowadays. It is. And the fact that now we have graphics cards that are pushing 1440p at high frame rates, and now obviously 1080p just through the limit frame rates, it only makes sense that a lot of people are still going to stay that, because that is what a lot of people prefer. 1440p still looks amazing. And 1080p at high frame rates, a lot of people prefer that, because a lot of people still play on 1080p TVs. And I wouldn't even say 1440p TVs, but the fact that you have a console designed in the similar fashion of how PCs are designed, where you can put the same CPU and just have a different GPU. There's no difference. It's literally the same hardware. It's just one will be a lower resolution and the other one will be a higher resolution. That's the only difference. There's nothing else different on these consoles besides the size of the SSD, a little bit of the memory bandwidth, which, to be honest, doesn't really matter because of the velocity architecture, which, I'm being honest, it actually does not matter that much because of optimizations and how the velocity architecture functions. But the fact that these consoles are the exact same thing, and it just mirrors how PCs have been done for a long period of time, where you can have the same CPU in one console and have different GPUs. It's the same thing. It's the same premise on PCs. And the fact that there's developers saying, oh, I could see this being an issue, that's bullshit, because you've been doing this on PCs forever. Like, there's no difference. You're just saying shit to just say shit. You're not really saying anything that makes logical sense, because you are debunked. Like, your literal thought process is being debunked by history. Is literally debunked by years of this happening. You cannot argue with that. You just can't. Logically, you cannot argue with that, because it makes no logical sense. That's why I tell people, yes, Microsoft won the pricing battle, not only because of the all access pricing, but just in general, the fact that majority of the processing in terms of like scale and how many consoles were made, there's more PS5s with the disk drive than there is the diskless. It's just fact. They spent more time trying to push the disk drive because it makes more money. Microsoft, when you do them like 440, like the $499 to $499 PS5 with disk drive, Xbox Series X, the Series X will stomp the PS5 every day of the week, because it is it is a better console overall at the same price point. And then the Series S is there for the entry level, for people that just want a box to play games, but it is still next gen because it still has ray tracing. It still has high frame rates, because that was the whole point of next generation, was ray tracing and high frame rates. It's not about 4K gaming, because 4K gaming is still, I wouldn't say, the main selling point. But yes, these things can do 4K. The Series S is primarily designed for that actual consumer, where it's 1080p, 1440p, where a lot of people sit, and it's a good entry point at $299. It's a great entry point for that price. And I see this thing selling like hotcakes, especially because when you look at the recent sales going on in Japan, the Xbox line sold out. Granted, like I said, it really depends on how many units they sent over there, but it's still impressive that it was able to crash the pre-orders. Like, people were flooding the Amazon Japan website, and it crashed to the point because people were trying to pre-order these consoles. And that's a big thing, because that never happens. Microsoft is not really that big in Japan, because usually a lot of cultural things where the Japanese don't really support companies that aren't their own. Like, that's just a natural thing. Where same thing happens in the United States, where a lot of people prefer to support companies in the US rather than companies overseas. That just makes logical sense. It's a natural thing that happens. But the fact that the Xbox was able to sell out in Japan, granted, like I said, it really depends on how many units they actually sent over there, because we don't know how many they sent, but it's impressive nonetheless. And that's why I tell people this is a very exciting time to be a gamer, because yes, to be honest, objectively honest, you cannot build a console, or you cannot build a PC that is able to compete with the Series S. It is physically impossible. For $300, it's impossible. You're never going to build a PC with the same CPU, same GPU capabilities, because the GPU alone is going to cost the price of that Xbox. There's no, you get what I'm saying? There's no way in hell. That console has so much value on the market that it is going to sell out. And that's why it's funny, because again, there wasn't that many made of the Series S. Most of them were the X, because it makes logical sense. I personally am going to go for the X because of the storage space, and I prefer the more power, because that's just how I am, is I'm a power user. I prefer more power. Like my PC, I pretty much, I have to spell that in all capitals for you. That's, it makes sense why. But I'm excited nonetheless, because this is an exciting time to be a gamer. This is an exciting time to truly enjoy what is going on, because the Zenimax purchase, like I said, this is going to lead to amazing games being developed for Xbox and still PC, and now mobile as well, because like I said, that all counts under the Xbox brand. Microsoft has spent the countless years since the failure launch of the Xbox One to play a long-term game, to win a long-term war, if we're going to call it that. But it's like Microsoft isn't really worried, because they are the industry leader. They are leading the industry in healthy practices and consumer-friendly practices, in cloud gaming and things like that, where Microsoft is truly prepared for this. And it seems like Sony is just playing pure catch-up. And this isn't me being a fanboy, because I've been honest, I prefer the Xbox brand over the PlayStation brand any day of the week. But I do that because I prefer the ecosystem. I prefer how things are connected. That's just how I am. I prefer the more stable online, because Xbox Live is definitely more stable than PSN. Let's just be honest here. I know a lot of people are going to get on my grill about that, but I'm like, yes, history has shown it is more stable. There's been more issues with PSN than there has been with Xbox Live. That's just facts. In terms of Game Pass and the PlayStation subscription, like PS5 Plus or PlayStation Plus, and the other thing being added to PlayStation Plus, it doesn't make sense, because now Microsoft is competing on a level where it is very difficult for Sony to catch up. And Sony has been backtracking and making a lot of anti-consumer moves that don't really make sense. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, Josh, Microsoft is doing the same thing. And I'm like, yes, I know. I'll call out Microsoft, because we have called out Microsoft for a lot of poor decisions they made. But based on what they're doing now, they're definitely making a lot of good decisions that a lot of people are happy about and excited. Because like I said, the fact that they were able to buy Zenimax, and the deal's still going through, but the fact that Zenimax is now going to be a Microsoft studio, and all the studios in Zenimax will now be Microsoft studios, means that we'll be able to get much more rich experiences. And now these developers can get access to new IPs to work on, or make new IPs, or work on other IPs. And it is going to be very interesting, because seeing how everything's playing out, Microsoft is definitely shaping up to be well equipped going into this next generation. It all just comes down to the day the consoles launch, and seeing the performance, and seeing how these things perform, and seeing how the games end up being. That's all that really matters at the end of the day. And I'm excited to see how this all plays out. But I thank you guys for coming back and listening to today's episode. Again, I do apologize that it took a little bit longer to get this episode out for you guys because, like I said, school was a pain in the ass this week. And I know you guys are going to tell me, Josh, focus on school. School's more important, bud. And I'm like, I know, I am. That's what I'm saying, is that I wanted to apologize because, like I said, I promised something that I didn't deliver on time. So I will own up to it and say I'm sorry about that. But I do thank you guys that you guys keep coming back and you keep listening to these episodes. You keep sharing them. You keep downloading them. You constantly keep giving me your input and how you feel about the topics. And it really does mean a lot to me. Just being honest, it really does. And I thank you guys for everything. I love you guys today. Please have yourselves a wonderful weekend. Please continue to be safe and take care of everyone around you, because the world is still a weird place. It's still super weird right now. Everything is just weird. And all we really can do is just have a little bit of faith and, take our time with everything, But I thank you guys for all the love and support. It really, really does mean a lot to me. And I will see you guys next week. Bye, guys. Please be safe. Bye, guys.
Hey there. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day and listening to today's episode. If you're interested in supporting the show, whether it be financially, clicking the follow button, or just sharing the episode, it all works for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for your time, and I love you guys to death.